Welcome to another edition of Disco Elysium Secrets on the 41st Precinct. I have a brand new selection of hidden gems in the game, so full disclosure, spoiler warning, watch now at your own risk. The art in Disco Elysium is clearly a standout feature and helps to elevate the game to its proudly held legendary status. From its iconic portrait design, to the moving watercolour painting in the menu, through to the dark tones which help to create the bleak, unsettling atmosphere of Martinez. What you may not have realised though is that this game has something very cool hidden in one of its most iconic pieces of art, and arguably the most complex design feature of the game. Throughout the game you will generate thoughts, which you then internalise based on the varying ways that you speak and behave. As you spend time thinking about the latest gibberish theory in your head, you will eventually trigger a breakthrough in which you are presented with a neat animation and a reading of the thought's solution from Lemble Brown. Each of those thoughts has its own unique icon to represent them, and in isolation they don't seem to be much at all, but if I was to show you this, you can see that each of these thoughts make up the tapestry that is the thought cabinet. By the way, shameless plug, if you want to see where they all fit, then you should check out the full video on my channel. Sticking with presentation for a brief moment, this little secret is for all the Kim and Harry bromance fans out there. Generally speaking, when left idle, Harry and Kim will fidget, check their watch, make notes, etc. But if you leave them just long enough that they think you're no longer watching, they decide to have 5 minutes of messing around. Yes, as you can see, Harry and Kim really are just like all other middle-aged men, young boys trapped inside an adult with a deep desire to just be silly. The nameless corpse of a merc hanging from a tree is the centre of the primary investigation, but actually when you play the game you find that solving the murder becomes secondary to all of the other fascinating things going on in the world of Revachol. As a consequence, many players don't necessarily follow through on all of the avenues available as a result of the initial inspection of the body. If you identify the serial number on the armour, you can then take it to Alice, who will run a check on the mercenary company, Crenell. This takes 24 hours for Alice to complete, so even though many will take the information to Alice, they'll often not follow up, as in that 24 hours you have other things develop. However, if you persist, you can also determine to Alice that armour such as this would have to be custom made to fit the wearer. Alice will then happily investigate further and find you some information on the victim, Lely Courtenaire. Courtenaire, if you recognise that name, is the surname of the remaining merc leader, or the fake scab protesting the right to work. The victim was his foster brother, hence the heightened emotional attachment to what's happened. In Lely's file, Alice will also reveal that life was bleak for Lely from day one. The Pale is the most fascinating piece of lore in the entire game, like some strange fog of war that eats away at the world whilst consuming all of its history, past, present, future. In truth, there's probably hours of video we could do to cover the Pale, but in its most basic terms, That's what it is. The Pale is a physical manifestation of its own strange power, somewhere people regularly travel through and experience pieces of timeline in history in all kinds of weird and wonderful ways. What's most fascinating about the Pale, though, is how it affects the world around you. And if you are thorough enough in your curiosity, you can actually talk to the Pale. When you try and use the broken intercom on the door to the doomed commercial area, you'll find most of the buttons on there to be useless. If you persist with the button for Slipstream SCA, however, you'll get a very strange call.
Michelle, just please.
Sounds like a ghost. Wind blows through your clothes and you feel detached from your surroundings. Inside the building, a cold memory hangs.
For 300 years I have been here, volatile and luminous, made of sodium and rain. If you want me, you can find me on the beach. Donnerstag.
After the call, Kim and Harry conclude that it's something weird with the wiring. But if you talk about your Pale theory later with Suna in the church, you'll theorise that the 2mm hole in the world is impacting the Doom commercial area, causing the failing businesses and explaining why you were able to communicate with an ancient intercom conversation. I think many people will be aware of this secret, but it's still really cool to know for those that haven't followed it through. In the Final Cut update, there were 4 political vision quests added as extra content. If you behave in a way that supports the moral intern, you'll eventually be able to pursue the moralist quest to assign responsibility. This basically follows the same pattern as other political vision quests. You decide who the moralists in the game are, and you go and ask them about contacting the moral intern. Without covering all of the details of that quest, you eventually build a radio to contact Coalition warship Archer. This is a huge ship in the sky which basically spies on Revachol for the moral intern and is also ready to bomb any future uprising. When you contact warship Archer, it will be made clear that you only have limited time and thus limited questions. Most people will ask their questions, not a lot will come of it, and the story will come on as expected. However, if you get to that conversation with the right tasks ticked off, you get a very different outcome. To trigger the event, you need to have fully investigated the 2mm hole in the world, you must completely finish your reality lowdown with Joyce and learn about the Pale, and with that you are then able to theorise to Suna what the 2mm hole in the world and the Pale actually are. If you have those items ticked off, then you're able to use your last question to warn the moral intern of what's happening, which means you are now granted a meeting with the top dogs of government.